What's going on, YouTube? So, welcome back to the channel. My name's HP. This is HP Speed. Today I've got my 2009 Scion XD, or an '07, I can't remember. Crap. 2009 Scion XD. Transmission pan is leaking. Easy fix. A little messy. Let's get started. Let's jack her up. Now that we got her jacked up, I'm going to go ahead and take off the wheel. You don't have to take off the wheel, but I like a little more wiggle room when I'm moving in and out. 21 millimeter works. So, looking at our transmission pan, we can see she's pretty leaky all the way around. We will have to remove this front cover, which looks to be like a 10 millimeter bolt. A couple of them, and then we'll be able to slide that out to access more of the bolt on the outside. We also have our drain pan right there, which is some type of hex head. Let's go ahead and check it out. Of course it's rusty. Why wouldn't it be rusty? There's a couple more up top. So our trans pan seems to be leaking from this backside right here. Pretty nasty. Let's go ahead and find out what hex key that is. This little HW3/8 is gonna do it. Fits in there kind of loose, but not terrible. With the drain pan underneath, let's go ahead and let all this drain out real quick. Disgusting. Let all that leak out for a little bit. While that's leaking out, as you can see, this does have a little crush washer on your bolt. So let's go ahead and clean this up real quick. Make sure it's nice and shiny. We're gonna let all this drain out. In the meantime, should be about 4 quarts-ish, give or take, depending if we leaked out enough. Once that's done draining, I'm gonna install this bolt back in with a new crush washer, and then I'm going to unbolt all those little 10 millimeter bolts all the way around. Foot pounds, schmoot pounds. So we got about like 19 of these 10 millimeter bolts. When pulling off the pan, it doesn't really matter what order. It matters whenever you're putting the pan back on, because you have to kind of go in a cross pattern to make sure that it seats properly. So let's go ahead and grab our electric wrench. Now the problem is that this still has a little bit of fluid inside of it, which is probably going to make a mess. The smart thing to do is to go ahead and drain our pan, put it in a reservoir. That way we have an empty pan that we can drain our fluid into. Let's go. Oh, sweet Jesus. Well, that was nice. Not a lot of fluid came off that. Now the pan's going to drip like crazy. We'll take that this way. Now, while I'm replacing this gasket, it's pretty dirty. I can try to clean that up a little bit, a little more. Well, we got to replace this filter. The reason why I have to replace filter is because we're already in here, and why not? Very easy to do. You have 3 more 10 millimeter bolts. They're pretty long, and what's kind of funny is you can actually see the dipstick right here for the trans tube. So let's go ahead and unbolt all 3 of these. This will leak out a lot of fluid. There's like a little hole, I think, right about there. That's going to unseal from there. We're going to make sure the seal comes out with it, but very easy to do. We just are going to make more of a mess. It is a hot day in Texas. That works. So another important thing to do is go ahead and take a look at these magnets, which should be sitting flat. They're going to be covered in a bunch of metal debris, like dust from the clutches and whatnot. But what you don't want to see is really huge chunks. Now there are a little bit of chunks in here, little bits of magnetic pieces. They're not actually big chunks, they're actually just little tiny pieces that have all clumped together that look like big pieces. So I'm not super concerned. The car has like 150,000 miles or something like that, so there's going to be some debris in here. Let's go ahead and clean all that up. let's go ahead and remove this gasket real quick. Take these little magnets out. Now we got the magnet nice and cleaned up. Let's go ahead and take a bigger magnet and run through this. Make sure we get all the bits of debris out, any bits of metal, just old wear and tear on the trans. And then we'll go ahead and blast this with brake cleaner, because why not? And then once we have it cleaned up, we're going to make sure that we fine clean all these edges of our pan, and then we'll put the new gasket on. Now that we got our gasket nice and cleaned up, we took our magnets, and there's little indentations where you're supposed to put those magnets at, and that's exactly where I've got them. Now that I've got it lined out, nice and cleaned up, I'm going to take my gasket. I don't believe it's side specific, as they look the same on both sides, but it does go on a certain way, so we just have to kind of find that pattern. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up nice and loosely, but not before I put my new transmission filter in there. Let's go ahead and pop this bad boy out. Now, our filter only goes on one way. If we remember on our old one, it's got this nice little hole for the filtrate. And then we have this input hole where the fluid just flows right through. This one has a gasket. We want to make sure our other one had a gasket, and it does. It's sitting in the pan over there. Let's go ahead and zip this bad boy on. Remember, it's just 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3. Some people like to put a little trans fluid in there. I think that's overkill because it's just going to leak out anyways. So let's not do that. So what we can do is we can take this little gasket right off of there, and I'm going to dip my finger in some of that new trans fluid, and then I'm going to apply it all the way around. That way it makes a nice seal when it goes on the transmission. And we're just going to coat that bad boy all the way around. Alrighty. I believe she goes on like this. We got 2 bolts here, and then we've got one in the back somewhere. Want to do these hand tight real quick. Switch it to kill mode. Cool. That's all it takes. Then gotta be super strong. Let's go ahead and clean our gasket surfaces real quick one more time. Now we are to the point where we can put this bad boy back on. Go ahead and get it loosely lined up, and what I'm gonna do, or attempt to do, is put some bolts in there, not like so. Oh yeah, that's ice cream, bud. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead and take some bolts, one on one and one on the other, make sure they're threaded through the gasket, and then I'm going to go ahead and verify while I put in each bolt loosely that I'm making sure that it's through the gasket. It's not that hard. If you put silicone on there, it can move. You could get excess silicone coming out the wazoo. I'm not really a fan of that. I like this method better. Just kind of makes me feel a little bit better when I'm doing it, and it's a way to verify that you're a badass. So let's keep going. Alright, I can visually see my gasket has made it all the way around. I can even feel all the way around. Make sure our gasket has not been pinched. Boy howdy, I am a genius. Alright, now the next thing to do is go ahead and I'm going to firmly press up on it, and I'm going to zip some on. Alright, one on each side. Let's go top and bottom. In the bottom. Now that she is firmly seated, let's go ahead and go in a crisscross pattern, bam to bam to bam to bam, up, top, down, left, right, until all of them are tight. Let's count how many we did. We just did 1, 2, 3, and then 4 down here. Let's keep going. We don't want to make them too tight. What we're trying to do is make sure that this thing is seated well. Now it's done, let's go ahead and lightly torque each one. Awesome. All right, believe we're solid all the way around. Let's go ahead and spray this off one more time, and then we'll lower the vehicle down and pour some fluid in. Now that we've got it all cleaned off, I want to make sure that there's no wetness around here whenever I pour it in. That way I can see if it's leaking again and I can curse myself out. Now, let's go ahead and put our bolts back on to get this all nice and secured. And then we'll fill her up. Trans dipstick is right here. Set that aside. Let's get a funnel. So the Scion XD takes actually 2.6 quarts, give or take. I bought 3 quarts, not like 4 like I originally thought. So I just have this Dexron for automatic transmission fluid, ATF fluid. I'm going to go ahead and pour 2 quarts in, and then I'm going to go ahead and probably put 2.5, put our dipstick in, and see where we are. So it just says ounces and milliliters, and I have no idea how many ounces are in a quart. Okay, Google, how many ounces are in a quart?
1 quart is equivalent to 32 fluid ounces.
All right, so 32 fluid ounces.
Equal to 32 fluid ounces.
Thanks for the slow response on that one. So we need to get it right about 16. That's about 2.5. Calls for 2.6. So maybe to that 400 mark, we'll ballpark it. All right, so we're not on level ground, but what I'm gonna have to do is start the vehicle. I'm gonna go ahead and let it start up, move around some fluid for a little bit, and then once that fluid is moved around, I'm gonna go ahead and back out the vehicle by shifting reverse, shifting and drive. I'm gonna shift around a little bit, let the gears and solenoids get all that fluid in there, and then I'm gonna drive it to some level ground where I'm gonna be able to stick this dipstick in. Now, if you can see on this dipstick right here, there's actually 2 sets of notches. This is the cold fill mark, and this is the hot fill mark. Now, technically, we're gonna be on the cold fill or the hot fill, probably hot fill if anything, where the fluid's gonna expand a little bit. So we'll probably check it somewhere in between. We just wanna make sure we're not off the dipstick. So while I let the vehicle kind of heat up for a little bit, make sure fluids get moving around and everything. This vehicle has 175,000 miles. Trans pan I noticed was kind of seeping, as you can see, was leaking around the bottom edge of it, not so much the front. Over time, those seals just kind of shrink, they get flat over time, so not too concerned about it leaking really. The condition of the fluid was right about where I think 175,000 mile transmission fluid should be. I imagine that filter was very clogged up. So hopefully this will do the vehicle a lot of good here in the future. Now let's go ahead and shift it back to reverse, drive, go through some of the gears, and then we'll drive it around front where we're going to check the fluid level one last time. Now let's go ahead and drive her up front with the hood open because we like to live dangerously. I can already tell it is shifting nice. I don't see any wet spots in my garage like I'm leaking fluid back the garage, so I think we're doing good so far. Let's drive her up front. All right, so we are looking like we're on the coal fill line, and we are ice cream. Look at that. Looks pretty good. Now what I'm gonna go do is I'm gonna go take it for a drive, make sure it shifts through all the gears appropriately. Stick that back in there first, of course, and then we're going to come back after it gets hot and see where our hot fill line is, and we should be good to go. Save of the year. Now another important thing to do, this is kind of self-explanatory, we're going to check under the vehicle and make sure we're not leaking any fluid right off the bat. Last thing we need is us to be driving, we run out of fluid, and then it grenades, and it was all for nothing. I don't see any leakage. I can already tell you driving so smoothly. Every shift is nice and crisp, not dragging out, even while under acceleration. Look at that, perfect shift. So beforehand, it was a little clunky, not clunky as a hard shift, but just didn't feel, smooth. Now it's not going to be a Mercedes-Benz or Cadillac after you get done, but this is going to improve the transmission life expectancy whenever you change fluid like this regularly. Some books call for it to be done at 100, some transmissions call for it to be at 60. This was long overdue. A leaky transmission pan is definitely a good opportunity for you to get in there, change your transmission fluid, and your vehicle will thank you later because you won't have to be replacing a $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 transmission in the future. All right, now that we went on a quick drive to get her hot, let's go ahead and check out fluid. I always like to wipe first. And we are a little low on our hot line, which means I think we need to put a little bit more fluid in there, which is fine. Sometimes that fluid will mitigate. Now, being a little low after a drive isn't terrible because sometimes there's air pockets that are in that filter, just kind of fluid moving around, not a worry. Definitely want it to go all the way throughout the transmission. Just gonna check underneath the car one more time, make sure she's not leaking, top her off, and that's it. No fluid leaks. Guys, thanks again for joining me, HP, here at HP Speed. Love having you here. Be sure to hit that like, notification bell, and subscribe to see more content. We'll see you next time.